Sir, it's been a year. Any thought? I want to really big picture this first. If I had told you a year ago that we would be where we are today, would you have believed it?
No. I mean, I genuinely thought this year, it just needed to be a competitive year. You finish, above 500. You put yourself in discussion for the NCAA tournament at least. There's some respectability, and you're okay. But this season was a complete 180 from any expectations coming into the year. And I mean, as Garth Brooks said, they not only missed the dance, but they also missed just the ACC tournament. So that right there was basically the turning point for NC State as far as the boosters were concerned. Not making it to the NCAA tournament is one thing. When they were officially eliminated from the ACC tournament, that embarrassment, I think, kind of pushed people over the edge a little bit.
Cory Smith, Pack Pride, is joining us here on the Adam Gold Show. When I read Kevin Keatts' statement about, thanking State fans and loving his time here and all of that, and it was very classy, I thought. He talked about, the new era of college sports, but for me, the real money part of that quote was, the basketball program will continue to thrive when supported to the level necessary to compete. So, how much validity is there to that?
Oh, it's very true. And I've talked about it when I come on this show.
Yep.
Part of the issue this past year, and it's not necessarily to say that Kevin Keatts didn't have some failures or downfalls as a coach this year, but he was given an NIL budget of less than $2.5 million. That's middle of the pack in the ACC, and you're talking about a program that this past season was coming off of an ACC championship, of a Final Four run. Whether you think it was a miracle or not, those are things that hadn't happened at NC State in over 30 years.
Right.
And he wasn't given the proper means to really build a competitive roster. So I think that was a major issue that they had this past year, and something that Kevin Keatts can turn to say, hey, I just wasn't supported the right way. But at the same time, he also came in during a different era, and when you come in your 8th year, you finally had some miracles, or your 7th year, you finally had some success as somewhat of a miracle. That doesn't really say a whole lot about the stability of the program, and I think that's what led a lot of boosters this past offseason, a lot of people that could have helped to build that NIL pot. They were saying, I'm going to take a wait and see here and see what happens, and they did, and you ended up with what you had this past year. And I think that's why now people are going, all right, I'm all in now, because this is the first time that NC State has hired a coach of any type of significance in not only the NIL era, but also the transfer portal era. So they're going, all right, we need to get this right and make sure that we have not only the coach in place, but also the program in place to be able to truly build off of this.
Before I go back with Kevin Keatts, Cory Smith, Pack Pride, is joining us here on the Adam Gold Show. Can you give me a snapshot of where you think we are? We've heard rumors about Will Wade, who is at McNeese State now, was at LSU at one point, got tangled up in that FBI mess, which people should understand. But before then was at VCU and did a very good job. But he's a wonderful coach, and he was apparently part of the one of the finalists when Kevin Keatts was hired. So we have to go back that far. I mean, Will Wade has been on the radar for this program for a bit. So where are we with a coaching search and some legit candidates right now?
Yeah, I mean, the top 2 candidates we've heard the most about have been Will Wade and Ryan Odom. Will Wade, obviously, you just described everything about him. Ryan Odom, currently the head coach at VCU, has had multiple stops. People might remember him as the previous head coach at UMBC,
yep.
number 16 seed that knocked off Virginia several years back. And interestingly enough, UVA might end up being NC State's biggest competition for him once they ultimately, decide to, once the season ultimately ends for them and they decide to look at a new head coach. So that could be the biggest competition. Whereas for Will Wade, there's potential there for Texas to kind of enter that mix. So, NC State obviously doesn't want to be the number 2 or number 3 option for any of these guys, but you have to kind of wait out this process and see who some of these teams end up going after. There's some other names in the mix, and I've mentioned them on our boards for people to go kind of check out. But another interesting name, obviously somebody that may not be the head coaching hire this time around, but if you end up with somebody leaving after a few years because they got a bigger job or because it doesn't work out. Another name to know in all this, Justin Gainey.
Yep.
From Tennessee, he's somebody that has really been impressive as his associate head coach there over at Tennessee, and obviously working under Rick Barnes. Had heard that he had been looked at by Florida State even, as one of their potential options. But, a guy that if he ends up going to a mid-major level over the next, 2 or 3 years and it really kind of cuts his teeth there, could be somebody for NC State to look at, a few more years as somebody that they want to be able to kind of target for whenever that happens.
Cory Smith, Pack Pride, is joining us here on the Adam Gold Show. Now I just want to go back to Kevin because I said this earlier. Whether I believe Kevin Keatts is a good coach or not doesn't matter. The record over 7 years prior to this year, and even if we said they would have made the NCAA tournament in the pandemic year, the year it was shut down, and even if we say that, and they won their first ACC tournament game, remember they beat Pitt to advance in the ACC tournament. Then the next day it was shut down, and there was the on-court ceremony before anything happened to give Florida State the trophy. I mean, if you go back, I kind of feel bad for Leonard Hamilton. I mean, that team might have been a Final Four team. They were legit good. So Florida State didn't get anything out of that season either. Either way, even if we said that would have been an NCAA tournament year, I mean, last year until they beat Duke, surprise. Then they shocked Virginia, thank you, Michael O'Connell, and then they beat UNC in the final. Until then, it was a case of they weren't going to the NCAA tournament, so it probably is a wash. But man, why couldn't they build on last year? That's the thing that gets me. Suddenly, the alumni have all this money.
Yeah, I mean, and one of the things I said a couple of times, is the fact that there was kind of a pot built up for Kevin Keatts last year to move on from him, and
right.
That pot, instead of being put towards NIL, was kind of pulled back to go, we'll be ready for whenever this happens again.
So they had made their decision last year.
Yeah, I mean, look, I just don't think there was any real confidence that
right.
he was going to build off of that. And that, for better or worse, that ended up being the case. But, when you look back at the last several years, you talked about 2020. Since then, every year has been, either not great or underwhelming compared to what you thought it would be. You go back to 21-22, obviously that was one of the worst seasons in NC State history, the most losses in NC State history. He's given an additional year, mostly because he signed a 2-year contract
right.
that was hit, due to the NCAA investigation. But he comes back the next year. You get Terquavion Smith back. You get Jarkel Joyner added to the mix. You get Casey Morsell healthy. You get obviously you get DJ Burns back that year too, and all of those guys end up leading to a run that went to the NCAA tournament. But you lost to Clemson 3 times that season, including in the ACC tournament when you thought you were the better team. You go to the NCAA tournament, but they lost in the first round. They never even advanced out of the first round. Now, yes, I know Creighton was a tough matchup, but they were an 11th seed. So you got to earn your way to being a higher ranking, and that to me, and I think to a lot of NC State fans, was not the season that you expected with that kind of cast that you had around you. And then last season, again, outside of that miracle run at the very end of the year, that was an underwhelming team too. That wasn't going to make the NCAA tournament. Got to the ACC tournament as a double-digit seed after potentially being a double bye team midway through ACC scheduling last year, but they just they flopped down the stretch, lost the Final 4 games, and I think that's a lot of the reason why NC State fans and major boosters said, we're not investing in this until we see consistent success. And it just really down the last 4 years really never came for Kevin Keatts.
All right, final thing for Cory Smith and Pack Bride. So that war chest of money that they used, obviously, to buy Kevin Keatts out, how much of that still exists to build up to, A, attract the next coach, and B, throw it to where they can compete financially? Because Louisville's was like more than twice the number of NIL money for men's basketball. So are they willing to go to that extreme to help whoever the new coach is rebuild this roster quickly?
Yeah, from what I've been told, just based off of yesterday with, the guys over at One Pack NIL, they've already kind of publicly posted that it was over $600,000 that was raised in one day just to be able to help with NIL with the new head coach. That doesn't seem like a ton.
No.
But if you're talking about one day being able to raise $600,000, what could happen once the coach is ultimately hired, depending on who that coach
right,
is.
Okay.
Getting Will Wade. Will Wade is who, the boosters want, who people, the fan base wants, and I feel like if that happens, that could change the way that this is all raised. I mean, that's kind of what happened with Louisville last year. Was Pat Kelsey was hired, and the day that Pat Kelsey was hired, they went out and said, all right, if we can get to $1 million, I will. I forget who the big booster was, but they said, I will match an NIL donation up to $1 million based on whatever happens today. And Louisville ended up raising $1 million, and one big booster matched the $1 million. So they raised $2 million in one day after the Pat Kelsey hire. That, to me, I think is what's going to ultimately need to happen for NC State, because you need somewhere between the ballpark of $4 and $5 million in order to be able to really, reconstruct this roster, because you're going to lose at minimum 6 players, probably 8 to 9, based off of everything that's happening this offseason. Yep. You need to replenish that roster with mostly the transfer portal early on. You're not going to be able to go out and do a whole lot of recruiting right now of players that haven't signed. So you're going to have to do it through the transfer portal. And I think, if you get a Will Wade, you get a Ryan Odom, that probably helps kind of reignite this whole thing. But there will be other names that enter the mix too. I mean, one name I've heard recently, Sean Miller, somebody that I know a lot of people know about, and we'll see if that ultimately ends up being somebody that enters the mix too.
Yeah. So, I mean, also part of that FBI investigation. But there were only bangers in terms of coaches that got caught up in that. I mean, it was Kansas, it was Florida, it was Arizona. So I know there were others. Cory Smith, Pack Pride, appreciate your time, my man. We're going to talk to your partner in just a little bit. Brian Geisinger joins us in about a half hour. So thank you so much.
All right, man. You have a good one, Adam.
You too. Cory Smith, Pack Pride here on the Adam Gold Show.